These wild fermented carrots are exploding with incredible flavor. They're firm yet with a slight tenderness and are rich in probiotics. They are sure to become one of your fermenting staples. Today's recipe has written instructions. You'll find a link in the description. Chapters are also provided to make it easy. If you need to return to the video, you can simply jump right to the section you want to revisit. However, if this is your first time watching, be sure to watch the video all the way through, since I give lots of notes throughout to set you up for fermentation success. Let's get started. You will need fresh raw carrots. I'm using carrots from my garden, but most grocery store carrots will also work. Fresh dill. If you don't have garden dill, you can find it in a package like this at the grocery store. 2 to 4 peeled whole garlic cloves, and optionally some fresh ginger slices. Lastly, you'll need some salt to make the brine. Do not use a salt that has anti-caking agents added, because these chemicals can cause a fermentation to fail. Read the ingredient label to know whether or not your salt contains them. The best salt to use is one whose ingredients say salt and only salt. Prepare a quart or liter-sized jar by washing it in hot soapy water. Peel the carrots. The skin is a bit tough and bitter, so I like them best when peeled. Next, we're going to cut the carrots into sticks. Cut the end of the carrot off and stand it up next to the jar. You want to cut the carrot so that the sticks will fit easily into the jar, plus leave room for a fermenting weight and brine. I'll cut the tip off about here, leaving 2 to 3 inches or 5 to 7 centimeters of headspace. Cut them into about this thickness. If too thin, they could become too soft during the fermentation. But if you like soft, then cut thin. Then make their width about like this. No worries about being exact on thickness and width. For the dill, you don't have to do this, but I like to cut the stems off. Simply add them minced up in another meal. That's what I do. I find it's easiest to load the carrots with the jar on its side. If you don't have a digital scale to weigh the carrots out, don't worry about it. If you pack your jar tight, the same way I'll be doing here, the carrot weight will be relatively close. Periodically, add the dill in as well. Toss in here and there the peeled garlic cloves. I don't demonstrate it here, but also optionally add the 4 to 5 slices of ginger periodically as well. Now that the jar is loaded, squeeze in more carrot sticks into the gaps until it's extra tight. I'm going to also squeeze another garlic clove down into that space. Using a chopstick for some assistance. The less gaps, the better. Next, let's make the saltwater brine. Add 1 tablespoon of fine salt to 1.5 cups or 350 milliliters of water. If you have a digital scale, weigh the salt out to 18 grams for best accuracy. Pour the brine over the carrots. I measured all this out behind the scenes, so it should work out near exact. For the fermentation weight, I recommend using a glass fermentation weight like this. Don't skip the weight. Some people leap ahead with the fermentation without a weight, but this puts the fermentation at risk. This is because during days 2 through 4, a lot of carbon dioxide gases are going to be released by the beneficial microbes that are responsible for the fermentation, aka the probiotics. Even though carrots are tightly packed and beneath the brine at the start, they will loosen and float up. Once exposed to the oxygen above the brine, they become susceptible to mold and other not-so-good pathogens that can cause the food to spoil instead of safely fermenting. I have a video called The 3 Stages of Fermentation, where I do a deeper dive on the science of what's going on inside that jar that we can't see with our eyes. Check that video out if you want to improve your fermentation knowledge and skills. Let's get back to our carrots. Place the glass weight in the jar. The jar should be pretty full after adding the weight. Quickly, let me show you an alternative using carrot slices instead of sticks. Add the carrot, dill, garlic, and optional ginger in layers. Squeeze carrot slices into the gaps. Leave about the same headspace. Make the brine exactly as the same before as already demonstrated and pour it over the carrot slices. They are going to most likely poke up a bit over the brine, so I'm going to use a little tart tamper here to press them down. You may have to do some finagling with a chopstick as well. Place the glass fermentation weight into the jar and make sure everything, including the weight, is submerged. But if you're a smidge short on the brine, do this. Add 1/4 teaspoon or 1 to 2 grams of fine salt to 2 tablespoons or 20 grams of water. Skip this step if your fermentation weight is already submerged. Place a loose lid on the jar. Oh, and quickly take a peek for large floaters. Get them pushed down beneath the brine or remove them altogether if they resist being pushed down. Place the jar on a towel or on a dish to catch any brine overflow that may occur. Keep them on the counter at room temperature for the fermentation period. This period can vary depending on your personal preferences. The short end of the fermentation period can be 7 to 8 days. On the long end, this can be 14 to 21 days, providing they're all fermenting in an environmental temperature between 70 and 80 degrees or 21 to 27 Celsius. Once fermented on the counter to your preference, remove the weight and tightly place the lid back on the jar. Transfer to the refrigerator for long-term storage where they will last for many months. Okay, so this is where most fermentation videos and books will drop you off, but I'm going to take you further so that you know what to expect in these upcoming days to weeks, and if needed, how to identify if the fermentation has gone bad. It's most important to keep an eye on the fermentation within the first week. This is when the most changes will occur. By day 2 or 3, the carrots will transition from a bright and vibrant color to slightly muted. The brine will become cloudy and sometimes a little brownish in color. This is normal and okay. The cloudiness indicates the beneficial bacteria are proliferating, and the muting colors indicate the pH is dropping. CO2 bubbles will also develop early on and last for only a few days as the carrots enter into stage 3 of fermentation. Check on the ferment daily for any new floaters during this bubbly time. This piece of dill got pushed up from the bubbles, so I'm going to remove it with a clean spoon to avoid any potential future mold. Here is an example of some little dill pieces that were pushed up and not caught soon enough. Rather, they were left unattended for a couple of days. They molded. I'm going to simply remove them with a clean spoon since they're just little specks and harmless at this point. Now, if these specks were instead left for longer, the mold would advance and become problematic and cause the fermentation to become unsafe. But since it was caught early, it's okay. Here's a little funk developing on this brine surface as well. Little tiny mold specks on the floaters and kind of a weird skin. I'm going to lift it off and use a paper towel to clean it up. Now it's perfect. Again, this was caught early, so it did not develop into a problem, hence the importance of keeping a daily eye on things during the first week. Next, this is something that I like to do, but it's not required. I take a pH reading of the fermentation so I can track its development during the first 5 to 7 days. The pH will tell me whether or not the fermentation is taking sound hold or if it's floundering. On day 1, the pH will read above 4.5. This is considered more of a neutral pH. By day 3 or 4, and no later than day 5, the pH should drop below 4.5, becoming acidic. A pH of 4.5 or lower, preferably even between 3 and 4.0, is what I call the safety zone. The beneficial bacteria such as leuconostoc and lactobacillus feed on the natural sugars in the food and release acid byproducts. These acids drop the pH into the safety zone, and the beneficial bacteria thrive in this acidic, salty, oxygen-free brine environment, while the potentially harmful pathogens die off, which is what makes fermented vegetables submerged beneath the brine safe instead of dangerous. If by day 5 the pH has not dropped below 4.5, that indicates the fermentation is not taking hold and the food will soon spoil. Additionally, you need to also smell the fermentation. A light, soury, sweet smell is what a normal and healthy fermentation should have. If ever there is a rotten or foul smell, that's caused by bad bacteria proliferating and taking over. In that case, do not eat the fermentation, throw it away, even if the pH is reading below 4.5. Although I do pH readings with just about everything I ferment, it is not required. I don't want you to feel discouraged if you don't have access to a pH meter or test strips. I simply consider it a handy and valuable tool. You can, of course, still ferment without it, and in that case, rely on your smell and your sight. Root and vine-growing vegetables have a tendency to develop Kahm yeast. Kahm yeast is a general name for a variety of harmless yeasts that are naturally present in the air. Although it's ugly, it's not dangerous. The fermented food beneath the brine is still safe to eat. Kahm yeast developed on these 2 jars on day 4, and the 3rd jar developed Kahm yeast on day 7 after filming this clip. If you remove the Kahm yeast now, it'll just grow back immediately the next day, so I just don't hassle with it. I tend to leave the Kahm yeast until the day I choose to move it to the refrigerator. Here are some more examples. This is the pH on the start day of the fermentation, and here is the pH on day 6. That is an excellent, safe pH value. And as you can see, I just stick the meter right through that Kahm yeast and rinse the meter afterwards. As I inspect further with eyes and nose, there's Kahm yeast but no mold nor any foul odor. Since everything looks good and smells normal, I will put the loose lid back on and leave it be. By this stage, the fermentation will become pretty low maintenance from here on out. However, it is a good idea to still check in periodically with smell and sight to make sure all is remaining healthy. Here are my carrots on day 18, and I'm going to now move them to the refrigerator. With freshly washed hands, I'll remove the fermenting weight. Yes, it's a little gross, but hands are washable. I'll then remove the rest of the Kahm yeast. A few specks left behind is no big deal. I'll check the pH one last time, and I see it's perfect. I'll do the exact same thing with my other jars. Since everything looks good, smells fine, and the pH is perfect, I'll just go ahead and take a taste test. Ooh, looks good. They're tangy because I let them ferment longer. They still have crunch, yet have a slight tenderness to them as well. Definitely a big success. I've got my lid on tight, and now I'm going to place it in the refrigerator. So there we have it, fermented carrots from beginning to end. I've got a video series on Fermentation Funk that does a deeper dive on those topics like Kahm yeast, mold, brown layers, and slimy brine. Click right here to check that series out if there's a topic you'd like to learn more about. And remember to watch my video, The 3 Stages of Fermentation, to help make you a better and more confident fermenter. Click right here, or find all the links in the description. Bye for now.